Welcome to the Seeking Clear podcast. This is a show about searching for the things that we all want. Better health, better relationships, meaningful and productive work, and clarity about the life that we are living. I am your coach and your host, Andrew Wuellner, and I'm bringing you amazing interviews with incredible people, meaningful stories, and powerful lessons every week, so that you can learn from real experts and teachers about how to fix your life, how to consistently improve yourself, and how you, in your own way, can keep seeking clear. Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Seeking Clear podcast. This is going to be a monologue episode. I'm going to talk about something that is, honestly, it's kind of difficult to talk about. It's one of those things where if you try to have a rational debate about it, you're going to find that a particular type of person always takes the same stance, and there's a particular type of person that will always take the opposite stance. And it's very hard to find people who can mediate or act as an intermediate in discussions about this particular topic. And that topic is nihilism. And if you're not familiar with nihilism, nihilism is a philosophy, it is a worldview, a set of beliefs, whatever you'd like to call it. It is the opinion that life is inherently meaningless. Now, before we get into talking about nihilism and before I give you my opinions on nihilism, optimism, and ultimately the meaning of life, I want to give you guys a few quick updates, because if you're following the podcast, you deserve updates. And sometimes I get so caught up working on things that I do not keep up with my duties as a host. So, first things first, this will be episode 10 of the podcast. So episode 11 is going to be filmed tomorrow. I have another interview lined up, and all of these episodes should be posted by Thanksgiving. I was supposed to begin posting them before October 20th. Some things got in the way. I was delayed with some of the audio editing I was having done for the podcast, the theme music, things like that. So it did get delayed, and I'm going to be publishing 2 episodes a day starting today. So you should be caught up fairly soon. And if you're waiting on these episodes, I do apologize. Secondly, you can expect an increase in the audio quality because I am getting a brand new microphone. I'm currently using a Blue Snowball. It was cost effective, but it's not the highest quality. So I did order a professional Audio Technica microphone. That will be coming in soon. So expect an increase in quality, at least sound quality, around episode 12 or 13. And also, lastly, expect a change in scenery because I am going to be getting an office space pretty soon. I have outgrown my personal training studio basement office, and so I will be moving everything into a brand new office that I will be leasing. That'll happen in the coming weeks. So if you watch the podcast, be prepared for a change in scenery. With all of that out of the way, I would like to dive into today's topic, because this one is near and dear to my heart. And the more we talk about nihilism, I'm going to give you some examples and also some sub-philosophies that fall under the umbrella of nihilism. The more we talk about these things, the more I think a lot of you are going to realize that at one point in your life, you have probably felt very nihilistic about something, about a circumstance, maybe about life itself. And I'm going to talk more about that. I'm going to talk more about the reality of existentialism and nihilism and suffering and pain in their more physical sense. But I want to point out that I'm not going to be telling you in this episode that nihilism is wrong. And the point of this episode I'm about to do is is not to debate nihilism. I'm not trying to debunk nihilism. I'm not trying to prove that I have something that makes more sense. I want to give you an optimist's approach to nihilism, because I do consider myself an inherent optimist. I consider myself someone who believes that there is a reason to live. There is a reason to do your best. I believe that there is meaning in life. I cannot tell you what those things are for you, because I do think that they're different for every person, and we'll get into that as well. But I am wholly an optimist. But there is a part of me that is a nihilist. There is a part of me that recognizes the validity of nihilistic claims. There is a part of me that does look at the world with a nihilistic filter, and I do see the absurdity that is life. Because when you have a nihilistic point of view, for example, someone who is a critical thinker, who might take on a nihilistic tendency, might say something like, well, humanity will go extinct eventually, and the sun will eventually expand and implode on itself and destroy the entire solar system, and Earth will be enveloped in flames. And considering that it would take us light years to get a spacecraft with humans on it to get to another nearby solar system, for safety, odds are we're never going to escape the solar system. It's likely that we might never escape the planet. I think we'll get to Mars and the moon, but it doesn't seem realistic at this point in time to expect us to be able to colonize them and actually really spread our branches. It doesn't seem likely. And on top of that, even if we could escape the solar system and get to another planet, what would that do for us? How far is it actually worth going? What is actually worth preserving? At that point, will we even be humans? If we end up uploading ourselves into computers and we live as a digital consciousness, if that's even possible, what does it all mean? And a nihilist looks at all of these complex ideas and says, there's no reason that any of this should happen. Legacy is meaningless because even if we escape to another planet, even if we upload ourselves to another computer, the universe as we understand it will eventually come to a heat death, which basically means all of the suns and the stars, well, there's only one sun, the sun is a star, all of the stars will run out of hydrogen fuel, they will burn through their heavier elements, and eventually there will be no gases left that can be fused, and all of the stars will blink out. All of the stars will eventually blink out and explode and disappear, turn into white dwarfs and black holes and neutron stars, which will burn very dimly for billions of years. And eventually those too will burn out. And the universe will reach total zero, complete equilibrium, right? And when that happens, there's literally no more movement. Molecules aren't even vibrating anymore, and life cannot exist. And that is a theory about how the universe will go out. Probably tens, hundreds of billions of years from now. It seems completely irrelevant to even think about. But ultimately, a nihilist is searching for the meaning in life, the meaning in a conscious existence, and any existence for that matter. It's not like we can really understand what consciousness is. So what is a conscious existence? We don't know. We can't prove that plants aren't conscious. There are so many big ideas that when you look at them, the shadow that they cast upon our psychology, the shadow that these ideas cast upon our life and our consciousness can be so dark and so large, and it can feel like it's impossible to locate the edge of the shadow, and you can feel like you're living in darkness because these shadows loom so big. And it can be very easy to then become nihilistic because you might think that everything is pointless because all life will eventually end. I mean, Earth will eventually be destroyed in all likelihood. This planet won't last. And you think of all of the work that we go through to try to secure our legacies. We write books, we get tombstones, right? We have famous historical landmarks like the Colosseum and the pyramids at Giza. And we do all of these insane things to protect these monuments, to try to save our legacy. But every year, wind and sand and rain erodes away the tombstones. There's cemeteries just down the road from where I live. I live in central Ohio in the United States. There are tombstones that date from the late 1700s, the early 1800s. There are veterans of the Civil War and pioneers buried there, and you can't even read the names on those tombstones because they've been weathered away by rain and wind and dirt. The ancestors, the descendants of those people wouldn't even know that they are their ancestors, because trying to preserve a legacy, trying to make a meaning out of all of this can be so difficult. And so what's the point? What's the point in trying to have a legacy? What's the point in having kids? What's the point in producing and building and creating? You might ask yourself these questions, and they're very valid questions. And typically, we don't like the answers that we come up with. But I do think that there is a different way to look at life, and it's subjective. Because, I mean, factually, empirically, I cannot prove to you that life has a meaning. I cannot prove to you that anything you do has a purpose. I can't prove that to you. So if you're going to find an answer that you like, if you want to find an answer that actually gives you some kind of meaning and actually opposes, the nihilistic tyranny that you might be experiencing in your psyche, you're going to have to be kind of subjective about things. So there are lots of different sub-philosophies that I think fall under the greater umbrella of nihilism. And you may have heard of a movement called voluntary human extinction. And this is a movement of people who think that humans should essentially stop reproducing. And I think the voluntary human extinction is a separate group, because there is another philosophy called anti-natalism. And anti-natalism is basically the idea that it is immoral to have children. And I'm not the best person to make that argument. I'll talk a little bit more about why I don't quite agree with anti-natalists, but I do understand where they're coming from, and I completely respect people who make the decision to not have children. I think if you don't want children, or if you don't feel like having children is a good idea, then you definitely shouldn't have kids. You should only have kids if you want them. And if you're willing to do all of the work that goes into being a parent, because there's a lot of work that goes into being a parent. And there are some amazing people out there like Tom Bilyeu of Impact Theory, who talks about this frequently. And he has nothing against having kids, but he has consciously chosen to not have kids because he knows that his purpose is in his company. It's in Impact Theory. He has an impact to make on the world. And he doesn't feel like he would have the resources or the time to be as good of a father as he'd want to be. So he made the conscious decision to choose a different path in life. And I really respect that. I think if you put that much thought into planning your life, you're already in the top 10% in terms of people who are going to go somewhere, because you have to have the things you do, especially when they're of that the magnitude of having a kid, that has to be premeditated. It really does. And if you had kids by accident, if you kind of fell into parenthood, that's okay too. I mean, you can pivot. It's not the end of the world. But you should be conscious about why you're doing it, and you should have opinions about it. You should have beliefs about parenting and beliefs about raising children, because that will prepare you for the decisions that you're going to have to make. Now, sorry to get off track there a little bit. All of these philosophies fall under nihilism, and it basically it comes down to the tenets of nihilism, which is that life does not have a purpose. There is no meaning. Everything will ultimately end, and for that reason, most of the stuff we do, if not all of it, is pointless, and it's ridiculous to care that much. And most of our values are meaningless, and the value structures and the beliefs that we hold are fake, and they are made up, and they don't have any basis in reality. And that's my general interpretation of the root of all of these philosophies. Now, like I stated earlier, factually, I can't argue with that. I cannot disprove that everything will be erased one day. There is always the chance that our understanding of the universe as it stands right now is very limited and incomplete and possibly wrong. And maybe there are multiple universes maybe one day we will have technology that would allow us to travel faster than the speed of light and travel to other galaxies. Maybe there will be technology or information that will allow us to hop between universes and we could travel the multiverse. There could possibly be a way to escape extinction. It seems unlikely, but I cannot dismiss it. But factually, I cannot oppose these basic tenets of nihilism, and I don't really think anyone can. I think we have to face the reality that is nihilism, and in our own way, find the meaning that nihilism states that empirically or factually is not there. If something is not there in reality, if our five senses cannot see it, if our rational brain cannot determine it, sometimes we have to be subjective. And a lot of times humans have to create things for themselves. And a lot of times we do it mentally, we do it psychologically. And this isn't a bad thing. I'm not telling you to make up lies. I'm not telling you to trick yourself. I'm not telling you to believe in things that you don't want to believe in, things that you can't believe in. Like, for example, if you're not religious, I cannot tell you to become religious. I was raised religious. I am no longer practicing organized religion. But at the same time, I consider myself agnostic. I do not dismiss it. I can see the massive value that people place in their value structures. And I don't like to deal in absolutes. I don't like to look at things as black and white, because the truth is life is very complex, and things that tell you life is black and white or something is black and white, those things tend to be dangerous. And it's for this reason that I think nihilism is very dangerous. I think it's dangerous to your psychology. If you are aware of nihilism, that is one thing. But when you embrace it and believe it and push it and argue for it and find reasons to accept it and look for proof that justifies your nihilism, you are on a path to self-destruction. I think you're looking for reasons to not care. And nihilism is complex, and I'm not here to categorize or generalize, although I will be doing some of that inevitably. Do not be offended by anything I say. I am just here sharing my experience, because as a young man, I was nihilistic. I lost religion in late high school, and I spent my entire college career being very nihilistic and very upset and angry and frustrated and confused and lost. And nihilism was a place to feel safe, right? Because amidst all of the confusion and the angst of being a young man, a young person who had just shattered his dreams and lost a lot of friends and was having trouble with his family, nihilism was an easy place to go, because all of the value structures that I had felt had betrayed me were torn down. They were meaningless with a nihilistic worldview, and I felt like I was more justified in my rebellion, in my anger. Nihilism is predicated on life being meaningless, and a big reason to think this, and a big reason to say that life might be meaningless and that, it's kind of wrong to care, is because of the suffering and the pain that we have to go through in life. And suffering is everywhere, but I don't think it's always bad. I think suffering is I don't think this, I know this. Suffering is a very natural part of life. When you look at fitness, for example, in order to get better at running, you have to do lots of running. You have to sprint. You have to run long distances. Whatever type of running you're training for, you have to do that. And you have to do it with such an intensity that it starts to hurt. Because that pain is just an effect. It is a symptom of growth, right? Because in order for the tissue to have to grow stronger, it has to become bigger. And in order for the tissue to become bigger, it has to tear. And then it has to rebuild itself. It has to understand the stimulus in order to respond to it. And if the stimulus is exertion, that stimulus is going to cause pain. That stimulus is difficulty. I mean, everything in life is like this. If you think about natural selection and evolution, which is arguably the biological foundation for life as we know it on this planet, in this world, and potentially in this universe, evolution and natural selection are built upon pain response and pain tolerance. If your pain tolerance is not high enough, you die off. And if you do not go through pain, if you do not experience enough difficulty and enough challenge, and you don't adapt properly by managing that pain, you die. You die. The species that can manage and adapt to pain and trial and challenge most effectively, that's the species that wins out. And then a nihilist would, of course, say, well, life is pointless. Why does this matter? Why does this analogy matter? Because you can talk all you want about natural selection and how suffering is part of it, but that doesn't make life meaningful. And this is where we have to get subjective, right? Because meaning is not something that is inherent. I think meaning is a human construct, ultimately. And a lot of people would argue with me on this, and that's fine, because you have to have your own way to look at this. But the way that I look at meaning is something that's created, and it's created by people. I think meaning can be measured, right? I think meaning can be measured through the experience of fulfillment, through the experience of accomplishment and growth and progress. I think those are the things that give us the most meaning. The problem with Western civilization and with Western existential nihilism is that they seem to equate meaning and joy and fulfillment and progress. They equate their ideals with happiness. And it's almost like a nihilist thinks that if life isn't happy, or if life involves suffering, it can't be meaningful. And I think that's completely wrong. I think that's part of the reason why society, for lack of a better word, has become soft. I think America and a lot of Western civilization is soft. It's weak. It complains. It pretends to be the victim. It points fingers. It makes excuses. And it's not willing to adopt a lot of responsibility. I think nihilism is an easy way out. And if that offends you, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to offend you. But this information, in my opinion, might be useful to you. It might change the way that you think about your nihilism, because for a lot of people, sometimes without their knowing, nihilism is just an easy way out. That's what it was for me. I can say this because that's what it was for me. For me, nihilism was an easy way out. I didn't want to take responsibility for my life. I did not want to be held accountable for my mistakes. And I didn't want to have to think too hard about the things that bothered me. So the answer was nihilism, because if I was a nihilist, it didn't matter. I didn't have to be responsible. I didn't have to suffer. I didn't have to do difficult things because it was pointless. It was easy to reject the things that the elders were telling me. It was easy to reject the social standards and the constructs because it was pointless. And I could just say that. It made sense to me. And it made me feel better about the fact that I was failing at a lot of these things. Meaning is not predicated on happiness. Meaning is not predicated on feeling good. Meaning is not predicated on having a utopia. A lot of nihilists, while they may see the world as being flawed, and they may see a lot of the suffering that we have to go through as pointless, a lot of them have an idea about what a perfect world would look like, and they think a perfect world would look like a world without suffering, a world where everything just makes sense and everything can be comfortable and we understand everything, and it's just, this is the way it is. It's a perfect system. And while there's a slim chance, maybe it's not slim, maybe there's a very real chance that one day we will have a utopia. Maybe one day, like I said, we can upload our consciousness into a computer and there is no more pain, there is no more suffering. We don't have to slaughter animals because we don't need to eat. Maybe we can harvest all of our energy from the sun and not bother anybody. Maybe that would be a utopia. I can't tell you if that's true. I can't tell you if it's realistic. But I can tell you that the world we live in right now has a lot of suffering. and a lot of pain. And it's not a utopia. And nihilism is a way to dismiss the suffering in the world. It's a way to say that this shouldn't be here because I can picture something that's better. And unless we have something that's better, I can't accept this. I'm not willing to be responsible for this. I don't want to be a part of this. And I understand that. I can empathize with that. I felt that way for a long time. There's a lot of things about history on this planet and the evolution of humans and the evolution of the planet and civilization that's not nice to look at. Like, the fact that we're still factory farming animals and slaughtering them for meat that we buy in the supermarket, and we do it without even batting an eye, right? I buy a big juicy ribeye steak. I don't think about the fact that a week ago this was a breathing cow eating grass and it was probably hung upside down and shot in the head, or the horrible. You can look this stuff up and watch videos from slaughterhouses, and it's not nice to think about, and it doesn't feel right. And you look at stuff like that, and yet you feel existential nihilism. You ask yourself, what's the point? Is this worth it? It's a tough question to answer. But when you propose an idealist alternative, a utopian alternative, the possibility of something where nothing like this has to happen, you have to ask yourself, how do we get there? Because worlds don't spawn in equilibrium. Nothing starts out perfect. Everything has to start out really ugly. And it takes a lot of ugliness after that to make it better. Life didn't start out with magnificent thumbs and beautiful hair and nice clear skin and voices and thoughts and deep brown eyes. Nothing started out this way. It started out as a single molecule that started replicating itself. And then it was an amoeba, and then it was bacteria, and then it was a fish, and then it was a frog, and then it was a reptile, and then it was a mammal, a mouse, and then, a monkey, right? Something like that. That's a gross oversimplification. But nothing starts out utopian. Nothing starts out idealistic. We start out so ugly. We're these little babies that can't even see 6 inches. We can't talk. We can't communicate. We can't feed ourselves. We can't do anything. Of course we have to slaughter animals. As long as we're eating meat, we have to do that. One day we can grow meat in a laboratory. I think we're very close. But our caveman ancestors couldn't do that. They had to go through suffering. They had to go through the ugliness. They had to evolve over tens of thousands of years. And maybe, just maybe, we had to slaughter animals to get to the utopian future where we can grow meat in a laboratory. And this is where we have to be subjective about the meaning of our suffering. Because understanding the fact that everything in life has to start out like wet clay, it has to start out ugly. It's a big chunk of marble. And if we want to carve it into a Michelangelo, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of blood and sweat and tears. And nothing in life can skip this phase. Nothing in life can skip the molding phase, the creation phase, the growth phase, the suffering, the pain, the challenge, the trial, the obstacles. It is there. It is a part of life. And I think humans have always been aware of that. We've always accepted that. We've always known that there's ugliness. But we have put meaning on the ugliness. We have been able to envision a better future. We knew that our kids would enjoy a better future. We knew that some of us knew that when we died, we would go to an afterlife. We believed in gods. We had rituals. We applied meaning to the things that we went through. And part of the reason why people struggle so much with existential nihilism in today's Western world is because we have lost the meaning. We don't understand why we're suffering anymore. We don't understand why there is ugliness. We don't see the future, the progress that this could be leading to. And it's easy to lose sight of that. It really is. Things like religion used to give us a lot of meaning, and a lot of people have lost that. And I'm not here to tell you that you need religion. I don't think anyone needs anything. I think you have to decide for yourself what you need. But if you don't have meaning and purpose to attribute to your suffering, if you don't have a reason to suffer, you're going to struggle. You're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel like everything is meaningless. I recently read a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And listening to that book again inspired a lot of what I'm talking about in this episode, and I highly recommend you read it if you haven't. Again, it's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was a man who was at Auschwitz concentration camp. He nearly died a lot of different times, from starvation, from beatings, from disease, from walking through snow without shoes, eating broth, getting one meal a day that's broth for weeks on end, months, malnutrition. Horrible, horrible stories. The book will change the way you think about suffering, undoubtedly. You may retain your nihilism even after reading it, but it will give you things to think about, I promise. And in the book, he says that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of sacrifice. He talks about a man who lost his wife very early. And he came to him and said, "Victor, my wife died so soon. I am so miserable. I have nothing without her. I don't know why I'm still alive, because without my wife, I feel like there's no meaning." And he said to the man, "Perhaps if you had died sooner, if you had died before your wife, how would she have handled this?" And he said she wouldn't have handled it well. She would probably be just as sad as I am. She wouldn't know what to do. She loved me just as much as I loved her. And if I had died before she did, I wouldn't want to leave her alone in this cold, dark world to be confused and depressed. I wouldn't want to do that to her. I can't fathom what she would feel without me if she was still alive and I was dead and gone. And he said, "This is your task. This is your cross to carry. She died before you did. And in doing so, she gave you the burden. And now you have to carry that burden through life, because if you had died before she did, she would be carrying this burden. So bear the burden for your wife." And he never specifies if that, made his depression go away. It probably didn't. But it gave meaning to his suffering. It was no longer pointless suffering. He was carrying a burden. Because if he had died first, his wife would have to carry that burden. And so now he has to live his life alone. His wife is gone. She can't come back. But he can carry that burden. And he can know that he is having to do what she would have had to do. And that gives it meaning. That gives it some purpose. In the context of a human life, there is meaning in that suffering. And you can look at anything you're doing in your life and find a meaning for the suffering. When I was $20,000 in credit card debt because I was trying to start a business and I couldn't afford to buy Christmas presents for my wife, and if I saw a children's book at the store that was $8 that I wanted to buy for my 1-year-old, and I had to seriously think about whether or not it was worth it because groceries were expensive, all of that hurt. That hurt my pride. It made me want to quit building my company. It made me want to go find a job. I was depressed as hell. I felt like nothing was going to work out. But in those moments, I had to remember the vision I have for my future, which is a house for my family, an office for my business, clients who are getting results. I'm happy. I'm doing meaningful work. And, I'm doing what I wanted to do. I had to remember that these trials were the method, the modality through which I was going to gain the experience and the skills and the wisdom to do what I eventually wanted to do one day. My YouTube channel sucked back then. My business sucked. I was bad at sales. I had no self-esteem. I felt completely lost and completely worthless. I couldn't buy Christmas presents for my wife, and I couldn't buy things for my daughter because it was too expensive. I hated going to the grocery store because I would cringe when she read me the total and I had to swipe my credit card, and I knew it was just going on to my debt and I'd be getting interest. I dreaded everything. But I knew it wasn't for nothing. I knew that I was on a mission to build a business that was going to make an impact. I knew that I wanted to be a coach because I knew that there were other people out there who were suffering. And I knew that by suffering and through suffering, I could learn something about life, and I could learn something about me and what I'm capable of. And I could gain insights that people who haven't suffered wouldn't have. It's the same reason a bodybuilder has a 6-pack and 20-inch biceps and you don't. If you do, congratulations. That's an achievement. But you most likely don't, because the bodybuilder suffered way more than you did. He did things that you're not willing to do. And if you want to learn things about life, and if you want to have a unique perspective, and if you want to build something authentic, sometimes you have to suffer in your own way. You have to experience challenges in your own way. And of course there's happiness. Of course there's joy. Of course there are positive emotions. These things are natural. What is unnatural is the way that Western civilization has trained us to think that suffering is bad. If you are depressed, you have an illness. If you have anxiety, you are mentally ill. If you have mood swings, you are mentally ill. That's not true. Those are human emotions: anxiety, depression, stress, existential nihilism. All of these things are natural parts of the human condition. They contribute to the whole. A creature cannot evolve in an environment where it is never tried, where it is never challenged. If you put an animal on a tropical island with no predators, an abundance of food, there's never any bad weather, it will never change. It'll get fat and it will start dying from disease. That's what's happening to Western civilization. That's what's happening to Western intellectuals. That is what's happening to people who are consumed by nihilism. They're not being challenged to grow. It's a way out. It's a way to avoid the discomfort. And when you're not growing, when you're not being challenged, you atrophy. It's what happens when you stop lifting weights. It's what happens when you stop going to school. It's what happens when you stop reading books. It's what happens when you stop setting goals. You stagnate. I'm not here to tell you that nihilism is evil. I'm not here to tell you that you're not allowed to be nihilistic. Of course you are. It's part of life. It's part of human psychology. You should be nihilistic sometimes. You should be aware of it. You should understand it and the role that it plays. But if you let it determine the course of your thoughts, if you allow it to saturate your mindset and your life, you will stagnate. You will begin to atrophy. You will begin to look at your thoughts, to look at your life, to look at your situation as a downward spiral. You will begin to see everything as pointless. We can't deny the fact that we are products of evolution. We are products of the natural world. We are products of our psychology and our brain. We are products of the circuitry in our brain. Negative emotions, negative thoughts, unpleasant truths, ugly realities are part of the world we live in. It's part of our psychology. It's part of what made us the way we are. We were born out of ugliness. We were born out of the entire spectrum of emotions. Our ancestors had anxiety and depression and existentialism just as much as we did. They didn't understand things just the way we don't. To treat negative emotions as a disorder, to treat them as if they don't belong in the world, will lead to unhappiness. That will lead to clinical depression. That will lead to severe nihilism, crippling anxiety. These things are byproducts of thought processes that are not natural, that have been propagated by the Western media, the culture we live in, social media, television, celebrities, everything that is trying to tell you that your suffering is not normal. That is what is crippling your mindset. That is what is killing you. And that is what is making so many of us unhappy with our lives. We're unable to live a normal life because we feel like we're not normal. We feel like the things that are wrong with us are actually problems. And most of the time, they're not. Most of the time, negative thoughts are completely normal. And they're there for a reason because they're helping you grow. The suffering will help you grow. Now, I said I would try as hard as I could to avoid blanket statements and generalizations and stereotypes, and I really do try as hard as I can to avoid these things because they're not always productive, but sometimes they can provide us with unique insights about the world. And I want you to think right now about people you know who are nihilistic, people you know who are pessimistic. They're always negative, they're always complaining, they're making excuses, they pretend to be victims. Think about some of those people. I know that you know people like that. Think about them right now. They're always avoiding discomfort. They're making excuses. They take instead of give. They're usually not that happy because of their thoughts, because of their worldview, but mostly because they are focused on the suffering itself. They're focused on the pain, as opposed to other people who are optimistic and happy and have meaning in life, who do not focus on their pain and suffering, which they have just as much as anyone else, but they don't focus on the pain and suffering. They focus on the meaning behind the pain and suffering. And we've talked about that extensively tonight. It's growth. It's progress. Sometimes it's just a means to an end. And I know people hate that phrase, but it's true. A lot of the ugly things that are happening in the world today, yes, could be done better, could be done with less pain, with less suffering. It could be done more effectively. It could be done more humanely. Of course, there will always be room for improvement. We will never have the utopia that a lot of us dream about. But a lot of it is a means to an end. And a lot of your suffering and your pain and your trials and the obstacles you're facing are a means to your end. A means to one of your ends. There is no end. Life is a journey. Does it end when you die? I don't know. But the things you're going through right now that are hard are taking you further down your path. Instead of focusing so much on the things that are hurting you, focus on why they're hurting you. Focus on what you're going to learn from being hurt. Focus on what the pain is teaching you. Don't focus on how much your workout hurts. Focus on the dream body that you want to have. The extra years you're adding to your life that you can spend with your grandchildren because you're exercising. Don't focus on how bland the salad tastes. Focus on what it's doing for your arteries. It's clearing all the plaque out. It's making your heart healthier. Stop focusing on the suffering and the pain and try to find the meaning. Find the reason. Identify the desired outcome, and you can put meaning into your life. You can put reason back into your suffering and your pain. And you can be still very painfully aware of nihilism, but you can reach a place in life where it no longer controls you, where it no longer saturates your thinking, where it no longer dictates how you feel, where you're no longer upset by the fact that you're depressed or anxious or stressed, because it's part of life. It's part of being human. You can see a psychologist, you can still take medication, you can still get treatment, you can still get help. You should get therapy, you should talk to people about how you're feeling. It's so important. But don't treat yourself like something's wrong with you, and don't expect life to always be happy. Happiness is not a natural state for humans. It is not a natural state for any organism. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nothing happens to any man that he is not formed by nature to bear." And it's true. People are very strong. You are very strong. Whatever you're suffering with, whatever pain you're going through, you can get through it. And you have to realize that it's just part of the bigger picture. Someone can Someone can die before they reach their 20s, and they can live a meaningful life filled with suffering, filled with joy, filled with learning, filled with tears, filled with anger, filled with the whole spectrum, the full spectrum of human emotion and experience. And they can have a more meaningful life than someone who lived to be 100, but spent their entire lives whining and complaining and making excuses and avoiding discomfort and avoiding challenges and hiding from life because it was uncomfortable. In the end, I think it all comes down to the way you look at suffering, the way you look at pain and challenges and obstacles. And of course, this is easier said than done. And a lot of people have to go through difficult things to truly understand that there is meaning, there is a purpose to them. It might not be empirical, it might not, it might not be scientific, but there is something internal that is to be gained from the experience of suffering, from the experience of pain. Because when you get through that, when you get to the other side, there is a sense of progress, there is fulfillment, there is growth. And if you look at a lot of the most successful people in the world, people who have millions and billions of dollars, people who are super happy and fulfilled, there is a correlation between suffering and success. People who become more successful have a higher tolerance for pain. That's all there is to it. People who spend their whole life being miserable, who never reach their goals, who complain about everything, who view the world as a nihilistic void of emptiness, they don't get to experience the full spectrum of human life because they view suffering as something to be avoided at any and all costs. Whereas the people who actually accomplish their goals, who actually become fulfilled by life, who become self-actualized or enlightened, those people who live with joy are people who are able to embrace the full spectrum of human emotions. They have accepted that negativity and nihilism are a normal part of human life. And they have found ways to cope with it. They have struggled. They've felt a lot of pain, but they got through it and they looked at it differently. And that's the bottom line, I think, for most of us. People who succeed and people who experience joy and live their human life to the fullest and experience the full spectrum of experiences and emotions, they saw the meaning in their suffering. They saw the purpose in all of the pain and all of the challenges because they knew it was contributing to their growth. I think I've just about covered my entire perspective on this issue. I went off script a few times there, probably repeated myself. I apologize. But I hope that this episode helped some of you. Even if you left early, you're not hearing this. But I hope that you stuck around long enough to hear something that struck a chord with you. And like I said, nihilism isn't evil. It's not bad. It's okay. It's part of life. And it'll always be there. But just take an objective look at your suffering and your pain and the challenges that are in front of you right now. And ask yourself, where are these taking you? What is this teaching you? What kinds of burdens are you bearing? And who are you bearing them for? What are you bearing them for? Why are you doing all of this? Whose lives are you trying to impact? What's the positive difference you're making? Because it's there. It's buried there. I promise. And if you look for it, you'll find it. But if you keep looking for excuses and you keep looking for reasons to complain and reasons to doubt everything, and if you actively stand up and try to defend nihilism, and you bend backwards, head over heels, trying to prove that nihilism is the ultimate truth, you will never find the things that nihilism claims don't exist. Fulfillment and joy and purpose. If you don't look for them, you won't find them. It's that simple. That's all I've got to say about it. So I hope I gave you some food for thought. I'm going to wrap this episode up here. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, hello, please leave a comment, because nihilism and worldviews and philosophy are endlessly fascinating to me, and I would love to hear what you think about everything I just said. What do you think about nihilism? What do you think about optimism? I'd love to see some discussions happening in the comments. Please share this episode with anyone who you think it might be beneficial to or it might be interesting to. I appreciate all of your support. I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Seeking Clear podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want more of it, you can watch it on the YouTube channel over at Andrew Wuellner, and you can also listen to it on the major podcasting platforms, anywhere podcasts are found. You can support the channel by subscribing to the YouTube channel, downloading it, sharing it, showing it to your friends. All of that is greatly appreciated. I love the support. It shows me that you guys are getting something from this podcast, and I will continue to do it as long as that is the case. But if subscribing or sharing doesn't feel like enough for you and you want to do more to support the channel, you can go to my website, andrewwuellner.com, and check out what I do, what I offer, see if you might be a good fit for one of my coaching programs or my courses. And you can also go to andrewwuellner.com/resources to see all of my special offers. On this page, I have links that will take you to some of my favorite products and services that I personally use, that I personally love, and I would highly recommend you guys use in your lives to help you improve your quality of life or your quality of business. For example, if you are an entrepreneur or a business owner who sells a service or a product online, you need to be using sales funnels. And if you're using sales funnels, you need to be using ClickFunnels, because ClickFunnels allows you to build the largest number of high quality funnels. You can build websites, membership sites, webinars, VSLs, opt-in pages. All of it's possible, and it integrates with all of your favorite technology, your payment processors, your autoresponders, Zapier, everything. The customer service is second to none, and ClickFunnels has a perfect track record of being an amazing software. In fact, my entire website, andrewwuellner.com, is built on ClickFunnels. So if you want to see what it can do, just look around my website. I've used just about every integration that's possible. But if you go to andrewwuellner.com/resources, you will see a link for a free 14-day trial of ClickFunnels. If you join using my link, it supports me, it supports the channel, and I will also support you by sending you free to download my very best templates from my own marketing campaigns, including webinar funnels, homepage funnels, and opt-in lead generation funnels. I will also give you a free 5 to 10 minute video audit of your website and funnels when they're done. This is normally something I only do with my one-to-one paying clients. But if you use my affiliate link, you build some funnels, you build your website, all you have to do is email me, send me the link. I will see that you are one of my affiliates, and I will check out your branding, your copywriting. I'll look at your funnel, I'll look at your website, and I will film a video and send it back to you and let you know exactly what I think, what you can improve, what I love. And I will do everything I can to support you and your online business, because you guys are supporting me and I appreciate you that much. So please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for sharing, for watching this podcast. Go to andrewwuellner.com/resources to see more ways that you can help support me and improve your own life. And I will see you guys in the next episode of the Seeking Clear podcast. Take care.